Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this afternoon's session. The discussion is on the future of transport, and my name is Sarah Headley-Hymers, the editorial director for the Middle East travel trade publication Connecting Travel. And I'm joined today by some of the most influential thought leaders in aviation. As Vice President and Global Managing Director of Aviation Travel and Tourism for ICF, Kata Cherep was recognized as one of the top 40 under 40 aviation professionals in the world. Kata, if you could join us on stage. We also have Kuljit Gataora, who is Boeing's President for the Middle East, Africa and Turkey, and he develops and implements a regional strategy. Kuljit, if you can join us. And finally, Karim Makhlouf is the Chief Commercial Officer for Royal Jordanian, implementing an ambitious 5-year plan for the airline, drawing on his more than 20 years' experience at other airlines. Karim, if you can join us on the stage. Thank you so much. At the end of the discussion, there'll be an opportunity for people to ask questions, but before we begin our discussion, I would like to invite each of our guests to tell you a little bit about themselves, their role within the industry at the moment, and their expertise. So, Kata, if I could start with you, please tell the audience about you.
I'll keep it brief, thank you. Is this working? Yeah, it is working. So, good morning. Nice to see you. As per the intro, I'm Kata Cherep. I lead the Global Aviation Travel and Tourism division of ICF, which is a global professional services firm headquartered in the US. We're about 8,000 people and with a deep heritage in climate change, energy, health, and economic development. So aviation, travel and tourism fits into that as part of our transportation portfolio as well as our infrastructure portfolio. And my team works on policy, strategy, operations and communication matters all across the aviation value chain. I'll keep it to that.
You do really sexy things with data, don't you?
Yeah, basically spreadsheets. Yeah, that's
Okay. Kuljit, please, can you tell us about your very important role at Boeing?
Yeah, thanks so much. It's great to be here. Yeah, look, I mean, I have got just, I think, one of the best jobs in aviation. I'm the president for Boeing across the Middle East, Turkey and Africa. You know, this is one of our most significant growing regions with such great variation in the markets. I have got the privileged view of being able to see everything that we do from an enterprise level, whether that's on the commercial side, the defense side, investments, joint ventures, innovations, everything. And it's just a thoroughly great role. I'm very privileged to have it. How I got here was that my background's in law. So I was a lawyer in private practice. I acted for Boeing as outside counsel. And one day I got a call that said, you know, why don't you come and work for us? So I actually started working for Boeing here in Dubai as their general counsel for the Middle East, India, and Africa. So again, that was for over 10 years ago, and we just had some fantastic growth, some great stories, and I was right in the middle of them. So yeah, just very glad to be here in this role.
Exciting times to be making
Absolutely.
planes. And Karim, tell me about your long and illustrious career in airlines.
Yeah, hello. First of all, thank you to the Resilience Council for the invitation and the organization of this panel. My name is Karim Makhlouf. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Royal Jordanian Airlines since 9 months now, driving the restructuring and the growth of the national carrier of Jordan. Yeah, my experience is for many years, I think 25 years, and I worked mainly in Europe, the Gulf and the Middle East, in both low-cost and traditional airlines, even 1 year in TUI, which is one of the largest tour operators. So yeah, I would say I'm an aviation passionist and very happy to be here and to discuss about the future of air travel.
It's an honor to have you all on stage with us today. Thank you. Kata, can we start with you and fast forward to the 2040s, and can you paint us a vivid picture of what transport will look like in that decade?
I'll try and make it vivid. It's going to be a pretty exciting couple of decades. A lot will change. It has already been a very dynamic industry. If you're on the previous panel, you would have heard and picked up on the fact that the COVID pandemic has accelerated a number of the trends which were already underway. Of course, the investment in the latest technology aircraft is one that we expect to continue. But looking sort of even further ahead in terms of what might be completely different to what we see today, certainly the arrival of electric aircraft, which are already in production, in testing on a small scale, but we expect them to be serving very short-haul and short-haul segments, and I'm sure my colleagues here will go into the technology in more detail, but certainly electric aviation will become a small but growing part of the transport solution. The arrival of hydrogen aircraft will also start to be seen by the mid to late 2030s. From a passenger experience point of view, it won't have a radical impact, but very importantly, it will have a significant environmental impact, which again was already touched on in the previous panel. We may start to see some other more radical technologies in terms of aircraft, but it takes such a long time, as Kuljit will no doubt attest, for new designs to come to fruition, that really by the 2040s, most of the aircraft we will be flying on will look pretty much like they do now, with the exception of some of the electric ones, including some of the VTOLs, which is an acronym, the vertical takeoff. You'll tell me what the last bit is.
And landing.
There you go, vertical takeoff and landing. Electric ones, which will look very different to what they are today. In terms of other changes that we can expect in transport, greater connectivity between different transport modes is one that we fully expect to continue to see. For example, connections from rail services to aviation, to air travel, or other ground modes to aviation. But fundamentally, the way that people travel, particularly long haul, is unlikely to change by the 2040s. The technology is the best there is and will continue to evolve, but if you need to go long haul, it's going to be flying on the technologies that continue to be evolved.
So picking up on the VTOL, Boeing has invested 450 million in a project, WISC, yes, namely. Can you tell us, Kuljit, what is WISC and what will it bring to the market?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we talked about two things there. One was electricity, one was autonomy. These are two themes that I think we're going to see going through aerospace in the short to near term. What we've done, what WISC is, it's a joint venture that we entered into with our partner Kitty Hawk, and and this company is in the advanced airborne mobility segment, and they have manufactured a prototype EVTOL, which is an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, which is totally autonomous, i.e. it does not require a pilot in it. And the prototype's called Cora, and this is all available online, so if you ever want to go and see it, there's great videos on it. And it's a really, I actually was lucky enough to go out to California to see this in real life, and it was really quite phenomenal, because just imagine something that takes off like a helicopter, and it sort of stands there, then it flies off like a fixed wing. And this is the really cool bit, it stops in midair, and it turns around, and it comes back, and it lands. I mean, so this is totally what we all imagined in terms of, the applications are huge in terms of urban air mobility, taxis. Now, this is obviously the first candidate aircraft of its type. It's electric, it's autonomous, and it's the first one of its type that is a candidate for certification. So at the moment, it's still in testing. It's done something like 1,500 test flights, and it's with the configuration that it's got at the moment, which is 2 seats, it's reaching speeds of about 160 kilometers an hour, and it can go about 40 kilometers in terms of range. Just to give you an idea of the sort of what we're talking about. We're not really talking about yet about the sort of aircraft that's going to go city to city, unless those cities are 40 kilometers apart. But ultimately this is to resolve a lot of air mobility issues in a completely environmentally friendly way. So a really exciting product, and I think that it's also a good opportunity to talk a little bit about electric, because clearly we have been researching all sorts of electric applications. I completely agree with Kata. At the moment, we don't see that in the kind of big mass transportation that we're currently doing. But certainly, it's an area that as that technology develops, it could certainly be there in the future. And we continue to research on smaller models, on electric powered, but often in the subsystems. Not for the main propulsion, not for the engine, but for the other parts that power it up. If that, I'm showing my ignorance here on the technical side of how engines work, but I think you get what I mean. But just very, very exciting. And the investment that you mentioned, it's really to now drive the next stage of growth and scalability.
And will it be available in our lifetime?
Yeah, you know what? I like those sorts of questions because I can say yes.
So, Kareem, moving on to the future of airlines and how these changes are going to impact airlines. You're now at the helm of Royal Jordanian, and you have an audacious 5-year plan. So take us to the year 2027 and tell us what's happening with Royal Jordanian.
Yeah, with pleasure. I mean, the future of air transport for airlines means really to rethink the model. I mean, COVID obviously was a terrible hit for all airlines, and I'm glad we are recovering, especially since March. I can say that numbers are coming back quickly. For Royal Jordanian, we decided to have a very ambitious growth plan, doubling the fleet from currently 24 aircrafts to 45 aircrafts. Doubling the number of passengers from 3 to 7 million. And we will adjust our model. We will, first of all, develop Amman as a leading hub for the Levant, so increase connectivity mainly from the neighboring countries, such as Iraq, Lebanon, Syria in the future, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, southern parts of Turkey, Cyprus, Israel, and Greece. And on the other hand, we will include parts of a tour operator model into the airline and focus on incoming tourism into Jordan. So that combination of a hub and spoke airline together with, let's say, elements of a tour operator airline will ensure the growth for Royal Jordanian Airlines and will bring us into the next 5 years, hopefully. So it's a very ambitious plan. We are finalizing right now our tender with the main aircraft manufacturers. Boeing is one of them, beside Airbus and Embraer. And we are looking forward to hopefully announce within the next 2 months a larger order. And for Royal Jordanian, definitely a game changer in terms of new positioning of the airline as such.
And what about other modes of transport coming up? In the Middle East, we're seeing that we're on the brink of a boom with cruise. We've got rail developments happening everywhere, including the hyperloop. As an airline, you must be looking at these developments and thinking how they will impact on your industry. What's your view on that?
Well, first of all, I think that the development of rail and cruises in this part of the world are traditionally slower than in Europe or the US, and definitely this will take some time. Personally, I think that cruises will have no major impact on aviation as such. The rail system actually I see as a positive impact in the future in terms of connectivity of both network transportation forms. So that means short feeder flights could be moved to rail, and this helps then to increase productivity in terms of airport slots and capacity, ATC as well. So I rather see a positive impact in the future in this part of the world, similar to things which are happening now in Europe. So it will support rather the growth of aviation than cannibalizing it.
And Kuljit, do you agree? You don't think that the rise of rail, the rise of cruise, the consciousness over flying in terms of sustainability, you don't feel that that's going to impact the industry in the next 2 decades?
No, I mean, I don't think that we see that as disrupting what we see, what we talked about in our 20-year forecast, which was really that, the Middle East is just fantastically positioned as a hub. We're still seeing and predicting that there'll be 3,000 aircraft required over that 20-year period, and we're also forecasting 2 times growth in both traffic and fleet. So look, these are all, I think I totally agree with Kareem. I mean, these are all sort of adjuncts, but I don't see it really doing anything to take anything away from that overall forecast.
And so the rise of other modes of transport will actually support aviation rather than detract from it.
I think you could definitely see that. I mean, look at the UAE. I mean, you've got 2 pretty significant airports in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. You've got a road link. So yeah, I mean, you could definitely see that being something that supports.
And Kata, from a global point of view, does the data support that? Does the data support that theory?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, certainly the picture in the Middle East will be quite different to other regions of the world where the existing infrastructure and the connectivity is somewhat different. So we're already seeing, for example, in Europe, an active switch from short-haul flying to rail and other modes being encouraged by regulations, policymakers, taxation regimes, and customer decisions. We're not there in this part of the world yet. The offer that is envisaged in terms of hyperloop or traditional rail services will bring some connectivity, but it's very limited in terms of the outstanding connectivity that already exists through the aviation network. I don't see that being replaced by other modes. Cargo is an interesting one because cargo doesn't care quite as much how it gets there, and customer perception doesn't play into it as much. I read with interest that the timeline on the Dubai Hyperloop for cargo has been brought forward relative to the passenger element, which is not surprising. And ditto for rail, I could see that the cargo element being taken up more quickly. But that symbiotic relationship that was already mentioned between other modes of transport and aviation, similar to the Air Arabia Etihad partnership we saw on the previous panel, is what I would see growing. So having those shorter connections onto the longer haul flights is one that I can see continuing for several decades.
So other modes of transport aren't a threat to aviation at the moment, but obviously a lack of sustainability is. And we have a lot of our hopes pegged on sustainable aviation fuel, SAF. But currently, 0.1% of the fuel used is SAF. So, Kata, this is an area that you're an expert in. How do we, as an industry, increase the amount of SAF being used?
It's a very good question. I think technically it's 0.01%. So it's a tiny, tiny amount. It really is. And essentially it boils down to a disconnect between the cost of production and the ability to pay. So ballpark figures that the average cost of producing sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, is about 4 times what it is to produce and deliver traditional kerosene. Just a couple of basics for level setting. Sustainable aviation fuel is a drop-in fuel, so at the point of using it, it is identical virtually to what you put in as Jet A1 into your aircraft. It has been proven that it is safe. The thing that makes it very interesting is that it can be produced in a myriad of ways from a whole range of feedstocks. The thing that makes it sustainable is, number one, the feedstocks themselves have to be sustainable, and example feedstocks can include used cooking oils, wastes, gases, municipal solid waste, so your garbage that goes to landfill can be turned into fuel that goes into aircraft. These are really exciting technologies. There are already 7 approved pathways for producing this. And certainly our work shows that there is enough feedstock out to 2050 to support the decarbonization of the industry, but at the moment there isn't enough being produced. And that comes down to this disconnect of how expensive it is, which means the producers are in a catch-22, that they don't have a guarantee that the airlines will buy this stuff, because the airlines are in a very competitive market, razor-thin margins, a largest chunk of their cost is fuel, and therefore, where there is this catch-22, policymakers have to step in. And I would just highlight some of the different experiences around the world. For example, in California, where there is a very well advanced low carbon fuel standard and a set of incentives that help to bridge this gap. So it's no surprise that almost all of the SAF that's being produced and uplifted is from California, because in that market, the producers are able to make a profit and the airlines are able to sign contracts for parity with jet fuel. That's what airlines want. Airlines want to be flying with sustainable aviation fuel, but it is not the job of the producers to lose money. So the job of the policymakers and the regulators is to come up with schemes that help to bridge that gap. We will absolutely see prices coming down. Cost of production will come down as they did in renewables. If we think back to the cost of solar panels, wind and so on 20 years ago, once that industry was kick-started, we're now seeing these technologies are cheaper than traditional sources. So we fully expect that to happen, but this needs to be kick-started, and it needs to be kick-started through smart policies that provide the right incentives, not taxing or punishing or forcing, but really allowing the market to work.
Very good point. It is about not just technology, but about policy, and that has to come into place. Kuljit, what is Boeing doing to incorporate SAF usage, and what is its plan regarding SAF?
No, absolutely. Look, we have been, I think, out front in terms of saying that we believe that SAF is the quickest alternative to jet fuel, and is one of the major ways in which the industry is going to be able to get to the net zero 2050 commitment. But look, it's going to take a concerted effort from regulators, from governments to get that done. And I think, here in the UAE, we've got to remember that the UAE was the first Gulf nation to come out and commit to net zero in 2050. So there's where there's that political will to move in that direction, you can look at some quite exciting projects that involve airlines, that involve hydrocarbon producers, which involve governments and regulators to really start moving in the right direction there. So, and look, we've got good momentum in the region as well. COP27 is going to be in Egypt. COP28 is going to be in the UAE. So I think we've got a good opportunity to now push some of this forward on the policy side. From a Boeing perspective, we committed in our sustainability report in 2021 that we would produce aircraft by 2030 that were fully certified to fly on SAF. So that's one thing that we've done. We went net zero in our own operations in 2020, and we also are buying stockpiles of SAF ourselves. So we just did the very large purchase, about 2 million gallons of SAF that we're using to power operations in our commercial operations in South Carolina and Washington State. So, which I think is the biggest by any airframer. So. We are definitely very committed to it. We're working with a lot of customers and partners and governments to get it to a place where it's scalable and therefore affordable. And
Karim, to take it to the airline, there was issues with availability of SAF in the Middle East, but you now have an exciting first SAF flight coming up. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think first of all it's important to mention again that the airlines contribute less than 2% of the global emissions. So I think it's important that we always take this into consideration. For Royal Jordanian Airlines, sustainability is key, in line with the repositioning of the airline towards a dynamic, innovative and digital airline. So our target is to have 10% SAF flights over consolidated fuel usage by 2030. These targets are in line with our One World partners. We announced that and we published that. 50% by 2050. Obviously availability, as mentioned already, is the key issue for airlines. I mean, as much as we would like, unfortunately, especially in this part of the world, availability is an issue. But We are now seeing availability in London, and we are planning, in line with our brand repositioning, to have the first SAF flight soon on one of the London flights in order to start, right? And obviously it's still a long way until 2030, but I think it's very important that sustainability gets a crucial role in all airlines, and Royal Jordanian Airlines is fully committed into this.
And beyond SAF, because it's not the only element of sustainability, what is Royal Jordanian as an airline doing to reach that ambitious zero carbon emissions by 2050 target?
I think the most important step, which we are announcing within the next 2 months, is our fleet renewal. So we are at the moment doing a tender of 34 narrow-body aircraft, and obviously Boeing is one of the candidates beside Airbus and Embraer for the regionals. And this renewal, thanks to the new technology of the aircraft manufacturers and of the engine providers in the industry, will help us to reduce emissions by 30%, around 30% within the next 5 years. So I think it's very important really to use the latest technology, and RJ, Royal Jordanian Airlines, is committed to provide one of the youngest fleets over the next 5 years. Beside that, we are working on increasing the productivity overall. As I mentioned, we are combining now tourism into Jordan as a tour operator model together with our hub and spoke, positioning Amman as the leading gateway for the Levant. And this alone will increase our seat load factor by around 10 to 15% in the next 5 years. So we are really utilizing the capacity now much more efficiently. And last but not least, we are as well focusing on geographical senseful O&Ds. So Amman obviously is ideally positioned between the Gulf, between the Levant and Europe. And markets like Iraq or like Lebanon are ideal gateways through Amman to Europe, for example, as well to the US. So this is all in line as well with sustainability. And we are very happy, let's say, to include sustainability as a new brand item. And yeah, besides SAF, lots of other things. And as well, light flights, obviously, to keep the aircraft lighter is very important in terms of seats, in terms of in-flight entertainment. So many, many small aspects which will help to reduce the emissions.
Kuljit, can you expand on that? Obviously, as the manufacturer, beyond the efforts that you're making with SAF, what else are manufacturers doing to help achieve these goals?
Yeah, sure. And look, I think Kareem said the most important one, which is the new technology that's being deployed on the new aircraft that is just making them more fuel efficient. So, you know, in our MAX family, in our 787 family, we're looking at efficiencies of 25 to 40%. And, you know, this is something that's just, at the moment, if you're looking at higher fuel prices, you know, given what's happening in Ukraine, this is just crucial. So that's one. I think the second one is digital products on aircraft. You know, where you can drive efficiency through every phase of aerospace operations, you're going to actually get yourself around 12% saving on your carbon footprint. And that's everything from digital products that can enable your travel planning, so the route planning, in terms of, you know, avoiding weather, going the most direct route. So with the most sophisticated mapping and GPS technology on the aircraft, to real-time data that's coming off the aircraft that's informing the operator of fuel efficiencies. So we found that these digital applications actually on older airframes are just getting great efficiency for operators. So that's the other one. And then one fact that I don't know many people would know, that, you know, by weight, 90% of Boeing aircraft are reusable or recyclable. So when you strip down an aircraft, you're going to get anything up to 6,000 parts that then we can recertify and sell. And in fact, it's a business our global services business does in used serviceable material, which obviously has got a cost benefit for customers, but also it's great because you're reusing something that's already been built rather than building something again. So yeah, those are the areas I'd really look at.
And it sounds like lots of small little incremental changes. Kata, I'll bring it to you next. Is it going to be enough, or is there more that we can do?
I think the honest answer is what we're doing today is not enough. Genuinely, if you look at the projections, absolutely admirable targets and really great progress from technology, from the uptake of sustainable fuels. But if you look at the maths, even if you get a 40% efficiency gain through technology and operations, if the industry is looking to double connectivity over the next couple of decades, that doesn't square with net zero. Let's be very honest about that. So then there's a couple of things that can and need to be done. First of all, the things that may seem small but are doable today count for a lot. So the things that have already been mentioned about lighter seats on the aircraft, your digital in-flight magazine, all the bits that help to reduce the fuel burn today are worth doing, because if you think about it, if you're able to remove a ton of carbon today and embed it, that's worth 28 tons by 2050. And we're trying to get to zero by 2050. We can't wait for a magic bullet in 2049 to suddenly decarbonize hundreds of millions. So that's one point. And then the other point, which might sound a bit technical, but really the definition of net zero is reducing everything as far as possible, as far as technically possible, and thereafter not just offsetting, i.e. paying somebody else not to emit, but to remove, to use negative emission technologies. So and this is going to be expensive. These technologies, carbon capture and storage, is an emerging, really exciting technology, but it's in its infancy. It's very expensive. What it does is literally sucks CO2 out of the air, condenses it, turns it into a solid, which you can then store, literally removing it. That's where we need to get to. But we have to recognize that this is going to cost. And if the industry and travelers are committed, because I fully agree that this has to come right through the buying decisions to choose more sustainable options, to recognize that we have to pay for our impacts, then that momentum is what's going to result in this transformation. So I would not just look at what is happening on new aircraft technologies and SAF, although absolutely, 98% of the emissions are from the burning of fuel, so that is the one we really have to target. But we also need to keep making progress on the little things that help to remove stuff today, and then look at all those other solutions which really allow the industry and the travelers, let's remember, we are the industry, but we're also the people who are flying, to actually take ownership of that change and drive that decarbonization, which really is going to be the only way the industry will have its license to continue to grow and operate, and the only way that each of us will continue to enjoy the huge benefits that travel and transport bring. But we have to take ownership of that responsibility and spend the money on it.
Very well said. On that point, I would like to ask if anybody in the audience has any questions for anybody on our panel. Any questions from anyone in the audience? I have a question. Who is going to pay the cost? Will this come down to the government, or will my holidays get more expensive?
I know what my answer is, but I'll let the airline go first.
Kareem, what do you think? Who will bear the cost?
Well, we have a lot of costs already. Fuel price obviously doubled within the last 16 to 18 months. Obviously, with the increase of productivity, the hope is that the prices of transportation will not grow in line with the cost, or as the cost will do. We heard a lot about SAF and about the new technologies. So hopefully there will be a fair, let's say, increase, which the consumer is willing to pay. And we can see that the consumer willingness for sustainability is very large. It's very high, especially in Europe or the US, where flights are labeled now as well by emissions, for example. And I can see that these trends will come here as well to this part of the world sooner or later. And yeah, we will try to have a moderate price increase, but obviously protecting the environment has a cost, and we all are responsible for that. So obviously as an airline we will try to make it soft, but definitely there should be a price increase, yeah.
Well, do you agree?
Look, I think that it's really difficult to isolate just one aspect of what builds up a cost. Because, look, I mean, if we try to do that now, I mean, we've now suddenly had this supervening event, which has changed everything. So I just think it's very hard to sort of extrapolate and say, well, look, this is now the cost of getting greener. I wouldn't actually even look at it in that way. I'd just say that, look, you know, the world has come together finally, agreed that we've got to get to these levels at 2050. I think that governments are going to have to put some concerted action in to ensure that by doing so that the entire economy doesn't collapse. So I would just say that I'm not, you know, it's just very hard to sort of just say, well, that's the pure cost of that, because there's just so many other factors.
And Kata, final word from you.
Yeah, yeah, as Koljit said, it's extremely complex. The positive note is that with fuel being such a, well, the number one contributor to emissions, but also the largest variable cost, the incentives are already aligned for airlines to reduce their fuel consumption. So that's really positive. So as soon as SAF becomes more available, as soon as it gets cheaper, and it can and it will, there are so many plants in development, so many people are pulling in the same direction that it will happen. It has to happen because nation states have made commitments, industries have made commitments, and I think crucially, finance, the global finance community is also committing to net zero. So that is impacting the type of things that are being invested in and not being invested in. And where the money leads, everything else follows. So I think there certainly is hope. The technology continues to evolve. It's very, very positive. And it doesn't have to cost as much as people fear it does. So obviously, if we quadrupled the price of fuel overnight for airlines, that would obviously flow through to more expensive holidays. But that's not what's happening. What we're trying to do is increase the amount of the newer technologies, such as the new fuels, so that prices can come down. And it's in this intervening period where it's absolutely crucial that policymakers are pulling in the same direction, setting the right signals for the private sector and for capital to make the right investments. So it doesn't have to be bad news. It's absolutely solvable, but it really requires people to be very focused on where we're trying to get to, why, and start making progress now in this decade.
Thank you, Kata. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Kata, Koljit, and Karim. A round of applause for our panelists and for the Resilience Council for bringing us all together today. It was a really good chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.